Donald Trump is suggesting that the Federal Aviation Administration's diversity efforts has made air travel less safe. By Zeke Miller and Chris Magarian. Washington AP, as the nation reeled from the deadliest American aviation disaster in more than 2 decades, President Donald Trump on Thursday baselessly blamed diversity initiatives for undermining air safety and questioned the actions of a U.S. Army helicopter pilot involved in the mid-air collision with a commercial airliner. 67 people are believed to have died in the Wednesday evening crash, which occurred while a flight from Wichita, Kansas, was landing at Washington Reagan National Airport. As Trump spoke, the federal investigation was just beginning and first responders were still working to recover bodies from the Potomac River. But he quickly moved to engage in speculation and political attacks, at a moment when Americans traditionally look to a sight and see for comfort, assurance and facts. Some really bad things happened and some things happened that shouldn't have happened, the Republican president said from the White House briefing room, just over 3 miles or 5 kilometers from the scene of the disaster. As the nation reeled from the deadliest American aviation disaster in more than 2 decades. Trump blamed former President Joe Biden's administration for encouraging the Federal Aviation Administration to recruit workers who suffer severe intellectual disabilities, psychiatric problems and other mental and physical conditions under a diversity and inclusion hiring initiative. He added that the program allowed for the hiring of people with hearing and vision issues as well as paralysis, epilepsy and dwarfism.
Air travel, I'll have more to say about that. I do want to point out that various articles that appeared prior to my entering office, and here's one. The FAA's diversity push includes focus on hiring people with severe intellectual and psychiatric disabilities. That is amazing. And then it says FAA says people with severe disabilities are most underrepresented segment of the workforce, and they want them in and they can be air traffic controllers. I don't think so. This was in January 14th, so that was a week before I entered office. They put a big push to put diversity into the FAA's program. Then another article, the Federal Aviation Administration, this was before I got to office, recently, second term. The FAA is actively recruiting workers who suffer severe intellectual disabilities, psychiatric problems, and other mental and physical conditions under a diversity and inclusion hiring initiative spelled out on the agency's website. Can you imagine? Policy has identified for special emphasis in recruitment and hiring. The FAA's website states they include hearing, vision, missing extremities, partial paralysis, complete paralysis, epilepsy, severe intellectual disability, psychiatric disability, and dwarfism all qualify.
Trump did not share any evidence that unqualified people were being put in critical positions like air traffic control. As if to underscore Trump's point, the White House invited reporters into the Oval Office to watch him sign another executive order that officials said would stop woke policies in federal aviation. Trump had already signed an executive order ending diversity initiatives at the FAA last week. President Donald Trump signed a presidential memorandum on aviation safety which he says will undo damage done to federal agencies by the Biden administration. He also doubled down on assertions that incompetence might have played a role in the crash. "We want the most competent people," Trump said. "We don't care what race they are." Asked if he plans to visit the crash site, Trump said he would meet with family members of the victims. "What's the site?" "The water. You want me to go swimming?" the president said. The FAA's diversity efforts aren't new. Before Trump's administration removed them from the agency's website this month, they were promoted there since at least 2013, including during Trump's first term in office. Substantially similar language about seeking candidates with disabilities was on the site during both Biden's term and Trump's first term, according to snapshots from the Internet Archive. Former FAA Administrator Michael Whitaker responded to accusations that the agency was prioritizing diversity over qualified candidates last year, saying that while the FAA seeks qualified candidates from a range of sources, each must meet rigorous qualifications that of course vary by position. After telling the families of the dead that, "Our hearts are shattered alongside yours," and leading a moment of silence, Trump proceeded to speculate about what had occurred. "We do not know what led to this crash, but we have some very strong opinions," he said. Trump wondered if the helicopter pilot was wearing night vision goggles, declared that you had a pilot problem, and that the helicopter was going at an angle that was unbelievably bad. He questioned why the Army pilot didn't change course, saying that you can stop a helicopter very quickly. He also mused about the air traffic controllers, saying of the two aircraft, for whatever reason they were at the same elevation, adding, they should have been at a different height. Even as Trump rushed to publicly ponder reasons for the crash, the National Transportation Safety Board was more circumspect as it begins examining what happened. We look at facts on our investigation, and that will take some time, said Jennifer Homendy, the board's chair. Democrats criticized Trump's remarks on Thursday. It's one thing for internet pundits to spew off conspiracy theories, it's another for the President of the United States, said Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer of New York. Vice President J.D. Vance, Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth all lined up behind Trump to praise his leadership and echo his concerns about diversity programs and hiring. When you don't have the best standards in who you're hiring, it means on the one hand, you're not getting the best people in government, Vance said, but on the other hand, it puts stresses people who are already there. Trump made a point to tell Duffy, who was sworn in on Tuesday as Buttigieg's replacement, it's not your fault. Pete Buttigieg responds to Trump's despicable comments blaming him day for the crash. By Emily Gooden, senior White House correspondent. 1740 the 30th of January 2025, updated 2340 the 30th 25. Pete Buttigieg fired back at Donald Trump, saying he should be leading, not lying, after the president blamed him, Barack Obama, Joe Biden and diversity hires for the collision of a commercial plane and military helicopter that took 67 lives. The former transportation secretary called Trump's comments despicable, and noted there were 0 commercial airline crash fatalities under his watch. Despicable, Buttigieg wrote on social media after Trump's press conference on the crash. As families grieve, Trump should be leading, not lying. We put safety first, drove down close calls, grew air traffic control, and had 0 commercial airline crash fatalities out of millions of flights on our watch, he noted. Buttigieg said, that is commander-in-chief, Trump is in charge. President Trump now oversees the military and the FAA. One of his first acts was to fire and suspend some of the key personnel who helped keep our skies safe. Time for the president to show actual leadership and explain what he will do to prevent this from happening again. Speaking at the White House on Thursday, Trump said Wednesday night's mid-air collision outside of Reagan National Airport was entirely preventable as he slammed diversity, equity and inclusion day recruiting practices in federal agencies. He added that he had some pretty good ideas of how the disaster occurred and vowed to make sure it would never happen again. The crash, coming a week after Trump took the oath of office, is the first big test of his administration's disaster response. His new transportation secretary, Sean Duffy, was also at the briefing. Duffy was sworn into office the day before the crash. Trump argued he put safety first as president while Presidents Barack Obama and Joe Biden prioritized politics. He also called Buttigieg by name, saying he was a disaster. He was a disaster as a mayor. He ran his city into the ground and he's a disaster now. He's just got a good line of bulls asterisk asterisk asterisk, Trump said of Buttigieg. Buttigieg was mayor of South Bend, Indiana, before Biden elevated him to his cabinet. He served as transportation secretary all 4 years of the Biden administration. But Trump blasted his tenure, saying, the initiative is part of the FAA, Federal Aviation Administration Diversity and Inclusion Hiring Plan. Think of that. Then he insisted that federal agencies need to be hiring based on intelligence rather than on diversity. He added that air traffic controllers need to be geniuses. As a reference, he pointed to a report from within the FAA that the workforce was too white. Buttigieg has bragged about raising FAA staffing during his tenure.
I'm also immediately appointing an acting commissioner to the FAA, Christopher Rocheleau, a 22-year veteran of the agency, highly respected. Christopher, thank you very much. Appreciate it. We must have only the highest standards for those who work in our aviation system. I changed the Obama standards from very mediocre at best to extraordinary. You remember that. Only the highest aptitude, they have to be the highest intellect and psychologically superior people were allowed to qualify for air traffic controllers. That was not so prior to getting there. When I arrived in 2016, I made that change very early on because I always felt this was a job that had to be superior intelligence, and we didn't really have that, and we had it. And then when I left office and Biden took over, he changed them back to lower than ever before. I put safety first. Obama, Biden, and the Democrats put policy first. And they put politics at a level that nobody's ever seen, because this was the lowest level. Their policy was horrible, and their politics was even worse. So as you know, last week, long before the crash, I signed an executive order restoring our highest standards for air traffic controllers and other important jobs throughout the country. So it was very interesting. About a week ago, almost upon entering office, I signed something last week that was an executive order, very powerful, on restoring the highest standards of air traffic controllers and others, by the way. Then my administration will set the highest possible bar for aviation safety. We have to have our smartest people. It doesn't matter what they look like, how they speak, who they are. It matters intellect, talent, the word talent. They have to be talented, naturally talented geniuses. You can't have regular people doing that job. They won't be able to do it. But we'll restore faith in American air travel. I'll have more to say about that. I do want to point out that various articles that appeared prior to my entering office.
Associated Press writer Ali Swenson. Duffy took the White House podium alongside Trump and declared, "When Americans take off in airplanes, they should expect to land at their destination." Duffy added, "We will not accept excuses." Federal officials have been raising concerns about an overtaxed and understaffed air traffic control system for years, especially after a series of close calls between planes at U.S. airports. They have cited issues with competitive pay, long hours, intensive training, and mandatory retirements for contributing to the staffing shortages. While these events are incredibly rare, our safety system is showing clear signs of strain that we cannot ignore, Homendy told lawmakers in 2023.
I want to comment on that.
Do you have a plan to go visit the site or meet with any of the
I
first
have a plan
responders?
to visit, not the site, because you tell me, what's the site, the order? For air traffic controllers, that was not so prior to getting there. When I arrived in 2016, I made that change very early on because I always felt this was a job that, and other jobs too, but this was a job that had to be superior intelligence, and we didn't really have that, and we had it. And then when I left office and Biden took over, he changed them back to lower than ever before. I put safety first. Obama, Biden, and the Democrats put policy first. And they put politics at a level that nobody's ever seen, because this was the lowest level. Their policy was horrible, and their politics was even worse. So as you know, last week, long before the crash, I signed an executive order restoring our highest standards for air traffic controllers and other important jobs throughout the country. So it was very interesting. About a week ago, almost upon entering office, I signed something last week that was an executive order, very powerful, on restoring the highest standards of air traffic controllers and others, by the way. And my administration will set the highest possible bar for aviation safety. We have to have our smartest people. It doesn't matter what they look like, how they speak, who they are. It matters intellect, talent, the word talent. They have to be talented, naturally talented geniuses. You can't have regular people doing that job. They won't be able to do it. But we'll restore faith in American air travel. I'll have more to say about that. I do want to point out that various articles that appeared prior to my entering office, and here's one. The FAA's diversity push includes focus on hiring people with intellectual and psychiatric disabilities. That is amazing. And then it says FAA says people with severe disabilities are most underrepresented segment of the workforce, and they want them in, and they want them, they can be air traffic controllers. I don't think so. This was in January 14th, so that was a week before I entered office. They put a big push to put diversity into the FAA's program. Then another article, the Federal Aviation Administration, this was before I got to office, recently, second term. The FAA is actively recruiting workers who suffer severe intellectual disabilities, psychiatric problems, and other mental and physical conditions under a diversity and inclusion hiring initiative spelled out on the agency's website. Can you imagine? These are people that are, I mean, actually, their lives are shortened because of the stress that they have. Brilliant people have to be in those positions, and their lives are actually shortened, very substantially shortened, because of the stress where you have many, many planes coming into one target.
Captain Stephen gave a brief rundown of what happened during the crash of the two planes over the Potomac River.
Here's what happened last night. I'm able to secure the actual audio from the incident over the Potomac last night. Let's listen in together.
Okay, 79 contact so far today. Okay. American 7130 for the final.
You're going to see a back and forth now between Reagan Tower and the various aircraft that they have lined up on approach into the airport. This happened at about 8:46 p.m. Last evening, and you can see there's several airplanes lined up. That's typical coming in about that time of night at Reagan. They're talking to American Airlines 3130, which I think is number 2 for the runway. They're telling them to slow down to their final approach speed because they're separating everybody on the way in. It's going to turn out that American 3130 is a key player in what happens here.
Well, American 3130. Pat 25, traffic just off the Wilkes Bridge is here today.
Pat 25 is the helicopter that ran into the CRJ 700. It was a PSA flight. The flight number is 5342. It would go under the call sign Blue Streak 5342. You don't ever hear them talking to tower. They've already been cleared to land on runway 33. So they would come in on an approach on runway 1, and then they would kind of circle the land on runway 33. It's a little shorter runway, but they take some of the regional jets and they put them on that runway. Pat 25 is the Black Hawk helicopter that is just south of the Woodrow Bridge, and they've just taken off. They're airborne. The tower is saying to them, there's traffic. It's a CRJ. It's at 1,200 feet, lined up for runway 33. Do you have that traffic? Pat 25 is going to call back and say yes.
It's 1,200 feet, start runway 33.
Pat 25 says, has the traffic in sight, request visual separation. What that means is that they're going to take responsibility for visual separation from that aircraft. What happened? Here's what I think happened. This is not the final word on it, but what I think happened was it was at night. There's several airplanes lined up. There is that Blue Streak 5342, which is a CRJ that they ran into. Right behind them, just a few miles, is American 3130. Everybody has their lights on as they're coming in. I believe the helicopter looked at the American 3130 and said, I've got the traffic in sight, and they never saw the airplane, the CRJ that was right next to them. That's my conjecture on what happens.
Special separation. This separation proof. American 1630 tower, runway 1 off wood, traffic throughout runway 33, dispatch 16 off funnel.
So this is typical stuff that's going on in a busy airport. They're lining somebody up to take off. They're saying, pay attention. I'm going to give you an immediate takeoff here. I've got traffic lining up for runway 33. That's the CRJ that got ran into. And he's on a 6-mile final. It might be somebody even behind him, but they're lining everybody up to take off and to land.
Please keep 6307. Keep rolling out to November ground 47 today.
You can see at the bottom of your screen there, the CRJ, the Blue Streak 5342, they're beginning to now kind of come out a little bit to line up to runway, to land on runway 33. They're not going to go right straight down the river. They got to come out a little bit wider and come in. But remember, Pat 25, which is up here, the helicopter at the middle of your screen, They've already said, we accept responsibility for visual separation.
American 16, turn to 1 star, 32, turn 14, Duck 25, traffic 2 mile low base runway 33, no delay, runway 1 clear for B to
There's
take off.
American to
Number
take
1,
off.
clear for takeoff, American 1630.
Here it comes.
CRJ in sight.
Now the tower is seeing what's happening, and they're saying, do you have the CRJ in sight? Because you guys are getting kind of close. And the Pat 25, the helicopter, says once again, yeah, and I'm asking for visual separation. Okay, the responsibility is on you then.
Pat 25, pass line is CRJ.
This club has a aircraft in sight, request visual separation.
Okay, so Pat 25 says, has the aircraft in sight, request visual separation. I don't think they had these guys in sight. I think they had the airplane behind them in sight. That's why this is such a tragedy.
American 472 by BAP now for visual. American 472, Washington, 1 star, 32, 17.
So you hear somebody in the tower go, oh, and they see what just happened. As you can see in your screen here, the collision took place. The tower has seen it happen in real time. They're human beings. They're reacting just like you and I would. The helicopter ran into the CRJ. The CRJ's airspace was their airspace. In front of them, behind them, on both sides of them, it was a responsibility of the helicopter to maintain visual separation. They even told him a couple times, do you got him in sight? Do you got him in sight? He said, yep, got him in sight. I'm accepting responsibility for the separation. And I think just like when you're driving in a car and you look and you see a car behind the one that almost hit you, you see that car and you didn't see the one right here. And when you turn out in front, sometimes there's a collision. It's really tragic when this happens in an airplane. Again, it's been decades since there's been a mid-air collision in this country. This is such an unusual circumstance to take place. It's such a tragedy. It's been 12 years since there's been a fatality in a commercial airliner here in the United States. That's unprecedented. And that wasn't a mid-air collision. That was just an accident. This is a mid-air collision, and this hasn't happened in forever.
Final request, runway 33, circle to 33. Second heading for American 3130. American 3130, go out. Left end 2705, maintain 3000. 270 heading, 3000.
See how fast he's talking? He's trying to get all these other airplanes out of here.
Crash. This is alert 3. Crash.
Okay, what's MWAA? It's the Metro Washington Airport Authority. Every airport has some sort of governing authority over it. Many times it's called the Port Authority. Up in Boston, it's Mass Port, right? In New York, it's the Port Authority. Down here in Washington, it's the Metro Washington Airport Authority. They're now announcing officially there's a crash. So they go over the radio and they broadcast to everybody. The tower is the main recipient of this, that there's been a crash. He's going to repeat that. That puts a whole bunch of things into motion all at the same time. The fire crews now are going to jump in their uniforms. They're going to get in their fire trucks. They're going to drive to where the crash is. There's going to be details about this coming. But this whole thing is very frenzied and happens very fast. But these are really highly trained professionals. They do a really terrific job.
Alert 3. Crash. This is alert 3.
And alert 3 is a crash.
Oh, shit. Where's the alert 3?
On January 29th, 2025, a tragic mid-air collision occurred over the Potomac River near Washington, D.C. An American Airlines regional jet collided with a U.S. Army Black Hawk helicopter, resulting in 67 fatalities. The National Transportation Safety Board is investigating the incident, as the helicopter was descending toward Ronald Reagan National Airport. Investigations indicate the helicopter was at an unauthorized altitude, which contributed to the collision. Recovery teams have faced challenges retrieving bodies from the icy river. The National Transportation Safety Board is leading the investigation into the incident. The collision involved an American Airlines regional jet on approach to Ronald Reagan National Airport and a U.S. Army Black Hawk helicopter. Initial reports suggest that the helicopter was at an incorrect altitude, which may have led to the collision. The incident resulted in 67 fatalities, with no survivors from either aircraft. Recovery efforts have been complicated by winter weather and the location over the river. The National Transportation Safety Board is conducting a detailed investigation to determine the cause and contributing factors. The investigation into the mid-air collision is still ongoing. Preliminary findings suggest there may have been a communication error between the helicopter and air traffic control. The National Transportation Safety Board is examining flight data recorders and cockpit voice recordings to understand the sequence of events. Safety protocols and airspace regulations are being reviewed to prevent similar incidents. Families of the victims have been notified, and support services are being provided. Investigators are also looking into the maintenance records of both aircraft. Mid-air collisions can occur when aircraft have difficulty detecting each other, especially in busy or complex airspace. Reduced visibility, pilot error, or equipment malfunctions can contribute. Investigators will likely examine all these factors to understand why the helicopter didn't detect the plane. They will also review air traffic control communications and radar data to piece together the events leading up to the crash. The investigation will likely focus on multiple factors, including the flight paths, communication logs, and weather conditions at the time. The National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, will analyze the cockpit voice recorders and flight data recorders from both aircraft to understand the sequence of events. They may also consider the possibility of mechanical issues or human error. The NTSB's findings will help improve safety protocols to prevent such tragedies in the future. It may take some time for a comprehensive report to be released. The investigation is ongoing, and more details will likely emerge as the National Transportation Safety Board completes its analysis.
It is off the approach at runway 33. Approach at runway 33. Helicopter crash. Helicopter. Copy out this morning. Crash. Alert 3. 2 helicopters.
Okay, so again, fog of war. The first report that they get is that it's 2 helicopters. They're going to clarify this really quickly because the tower is talking back and forth to them. The tower's going to say, nope, it was a CRJ and a helicopter. So they get this, because it's cleared up pretty fast.
Helicopter CRJ approaching runway 33.
That's really fast.
Helicopter CRJ. The approach in runway 33, a mile long final. Crash. Kilo CRJ, approach in 33. Okay. How many totals on board? We don't have any of that information. Tower's reporting a CRJ and a helicopter crash.
So they're passing the information back and forth to the first responders who need it. Everybody's trying to clarify while they're jumping in their trucks and they're heading out there. Now they know exactly where they're going. It's at the approach end of runway 33. It's somewhere in the Potomac. Now they're going to have to coordinate boats and other things. Eventually they're going to get helicopters involved.
Can we go ahead and hold all operations till we have emergency units respond? We're going to go ahead and show the aerodrome closed.
They want to close the airport so they can go.
Yeah, that's affirmative. All operations aerodrome closed.
Everything's closed.
And everybody just hold your positions, please, on the field right now.
Okay, so this is the ground controller. Now, the ground controller is the one that's going to get all these trucks going where they need to go. But the ground controller needs to stop all the airplanes. So she just makes a blanket broadcast. Everybody stop right where you are. Every once in a while, you kind of half hear that, and then you say, okay, I'm sorry. And there's also people asking to be released from their gate to go. They're not into what's going on yet because they just put their headsets on, and they're just getting ready to go. One aircraft's going to ask to do this, and she's just going to say, everybody stop.
That's 438, ready for taxi.
Everyone's going to have to hold for down. I'll get back to you just as soon as I can. Fire command, the accident happened in the river. Both the helicopter and the plane crashed in the river. It's east of the approach end of runway 33. Field is closed. The airfield is closed.
Runways as well?
The ARF is the Aircraft Rescue and Firefighters. That's the actual fire chief that's in the fire truck. He's asking, is the airport closed and are all the runways closed as well? That way he can expedite getting out there. He doesn't have to stop and ask, can I cross this runway? Can I go on that taxiway? She's about to tell him, the whole place is shut down. You go. You own the airport now.
All runways are closed. Nobody's landing. No one's moving at all.
And we have clearance across all taxiways, correct?
Yes, you have clearance through the whole field, all taxiways and runways.
So basically she's saying to these guys, go. And at that moment, the fire trucks take off. What we know about the accident at this point is that there were no survivors. It's now a recovery operation. That's the sad part about all of this, and that's the part that really hits us hard. right here, but I know you wanted to hear what happened and maybe my response to how they handled this emergency and what led to it. It looks pretty clear at this point that the helicopter had accepted visual separation. That's when they make that call, when they're cleared for that. They said, yep, we've got the airplane in sight, and the airplane they had in sight was the wrong airplane.
If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe for more content, and leave a comment below. See you next time.